The discovery in the well. The twin sons of Telin scorched the vast desert landscape, casting long shadows across the ancient ruins that dotted the horizon. Kiran, a young warrior trained in the ancient art of kung fu, stood at the edge of a perfectly circular opening in the ground. His dark robes fluttered in the hot wind as he peered into the depths below, the well's perfectly carved stones speaking of a civilization long forgotten. Master Su's words echoed in his mind, "Curiosity is a dangerous indulgence, young one. It can lead you to wisdom or to your doom." Yet here he was, defying years of cautionary teachings, drawn by whispers of something extraordinary hidden beneath the earth. The circular opening wasn't just any well, it was an artifact of the Old Ones, those mysterious beings who had inhabited Telin long before humans arrived. Its walls were carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, and its depth seemed endless. Kiran had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He had gathered information from the scattered settlements across the desert, piecing together fragments of stories about a being of immense power and knowledge imprisoned beneath the earth. Some called it a demon, others a fallen god, but all agreed on one thing: those who sought it out never returned the same, if they returned at all. He secured his rope to a nearby stone outcropping, testing it 3 times as Master Su had taught him. Preparation prevents failure, the old master would say, and these words had been drilled into Kiran's mind through countless hours of training. The young warrior took a deep breath, centering himself as he had been taught. His hands moved through familiar patterns: tiger, crane, snake, each gesture calming his mind and preparing his body for what lay ahead. Then, without further hesitation, he began his descent into the darkness. The well's walls were cool to the touch, a stark contrast to the desert heat above. As Kiran lowered himself deeper, he noticed that the carved patterns began to emit a faint phosphorescent glow, providing just enough light to see by. The air grew thicker, heavy with the weight of ages and something else, something alien. After what seemed like hours, his feet touched solid ground. Kiran found himself in a vast chamber that defied the natural laws of the desert above. The ceiling soared high above him, supported by columns that seemed to be made of living crystal. The same phosphorescent patterns from the well walls covered everything, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that made his skin tingle. But it was what lay at the chamber's center that made his breath catch in his throat. Seated upon what appeared to be a throne of black metal was a being unlike anything Kiran had ever seen or imagined. Its skin was an ashen green, textured like weathered stone, and its head was elongated and elegant in a way that spoke of evolution on a world far from this one. The being's eyes, 3 of them, were completely black, yet they held an intelligence that made Kiran's scholarly heart race with excitement and fear. The creature was bound to its throne by chains that seemed to be made of starlight, each link humming with power that Kiran could feel in his bones. As he approached, those eyes fixed upon him with an intensity that made him want to flee and draw closer at the same time. So, the being spoke, its voice resonating directly in Kiran's mind: "Another seeker comes to gaze upon the prisoner of the well." The words carried centuries of weariness, but also a hint of curiosity. "Tell me, young one, what brings you to this place of forgotten things?" Kiran straightened his spine, calling upon all his training to keep his voice steady. "I seek knowledge," he replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "The desert speaks of a being of great wisdom imprisoned beneath the earth. I came to learn the truth of these tales." A sound like distant thunder rolled through the chamber, the being's laughter. "Truth? What makes you think you can handle truth, child of dust? I have seen empires rise and fall among the stars. I have walked paths that would shatter your sanity to glimpse. What truth could you possibly hope to comprehend?" Instead of retreating, Kiran took a step forward. "I am Kiran, student of Master Su, practitioner of the ancient way. I have spent my life pursuing knowledge, knowing that each lesson learned reveals how much more there is to understand. I do not claim to be ready for all truths, but I am ready to begin." The being's middle eye narrowed slightly, and Kiran felt a presence brush against his mind, gentle but immensely powerful. After a moment, the creature nodded. You speak with wisdom beyond your years, Kirin of the ancient way. I am called Zarek, though I have worn many names across the epochs of my existence. Zarek shifted slightly in his throne, the chains of starlight tinkling like crystal wind chimes. You show courage in coming here, and wisdom in admitting the limits of your understanding. Perhaps there is something I can teach you. But know this, my knowledge comes with a price. Are you willing to pay it? Kirin felt a shiver run down his spine, but he held his ground. What is this price? Everything you believe to be true will be challenged. Every certainty you cling to will be shaken. The path of true knowledge is not gentle, young one. It reshapes those who walk it, sometimes breaking them in the process. Are you prepared for such a journey? The young warrior considered these words carefully. His entire life had been spent in pursuit of knowledge and understanding, training his body and mind under Master Su's guidance. But he had always sensed there was more, something beyond the ancient scrolls and practiced forms. Here, perhaps, was his chance to learn what lay behind the veil of ordinary understanding. I am prepared, Kirin said finally, bowing deeply in the traditional manner of a student to master. Zarek's eyes seemed to glow brighter for a moment. We shall see, the alien being replied, raising one of its four-fingered hands. We shall see indeed. What followed was unlike any lesson Kirin had ever experienced. Zarek's teaching began not with physical movements or philosophical discussions, but with visions, images and sensations beamed directly into Kirin's mind. He saw worlds beyond imagination, civilizations that spanned galaxies, beings of pure energy dancing among the stars. Each vision was accompanied by pain, not physical pain, but the deep ache of a mind being forced to expand beyond its comfortable limits. Kirin felt himself changing, his understanding of reality shifting and growing with each passing moment. Hours blended into days as Zarek shared not just knowledge, but experience. The alien being taught Kirin forms of martial arts that incorporated movements impossible for human bodies, then showed him how to adapt them, how to take the principles behind them and apply them in new ways. But more than physical techniques, Zarek taught him about the underlying fabric of reality itself. The alien showed him how the universe was connected by threads of energy that most beings never perceived, and how these connections could be manipulated by those who understood them. Your kung fu, Zarek explained, is but a shadow of true mastery. It focuses on the physical form, on the flow of energy through flesh and bone. But there is so much more. The ancients of your world glimpsed it, but they never fully understood. They created techniques that scratched the surface of reality's true nature. As Kirin absorbed these lessons, he began to understand why Zarek was kept chained in this underground chamber. The being's knowledge was dangerous, not because it was evil, but because it had the power to completely reshape one's understanding of reality. Such knowledge, in the wrong hands, could tear the very fabric of civilization apart. Yet there was something else, something Zarek wasn't telling him. Despite the alien's willingness to share knowledge, there were moments when Kirin sensed a deep sadness, an ancient pain that the being kept carefully guarded. What had led to Zarek's imprisonment? Who had bound this ancient being in chains of starlight, and why? These questions burned in Kirin's mind, but he knew better than to ask them directly. Master Su had taught him that some knowledge could only be earned through patience and trust. So he focused on his lessons, pushing himself to understand concepts that made his mind feel like it was trying to fold itself inside out. Days passed, perhaps weeks. Time had little meaning in the chamber beneath the earth. Kirin's body grew stronger, his mind sharper, but most importantly, his understanding of reality itself began to shift. He started to see the world not as a collection of separate things, but as a vast web of interconnected energy and possibility. And somewhere along the way, he began to notice something else. The chains that bound Zarek weren't just restraints, they were changing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the starlight that composed them was dimming, the links growing just slightly less solid with each passing day. As this realization dawned on him, Kieran finally understood why he had been drawn to this place. The whispers that had led him here, the compulsion to descend into the well, they hadn't been random. He had been chosen for a purpose, though whether by Zarek or by some greater design, he couldn't yet tell. One thing was certain, his journey was just beginning, and the path ahead would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, about reality, and about the true nature of power and responsibility. As the twin sons of Telin set once again over the desert above, Kieran prepared himself for another lesson, knowing that each new piece of knowledge brought him closer to a truth that would change not just his life, but potentially the fate of worlds beyond counting shadows of the past. The phosphorescent patterns on the chamber walls pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm as Kieran moved through forms that would have been impossible just weeks ago. His body flowed like liquid starlight, each movement precise yet fluid, embodying principles that defied conventional physics. Under Zarek's guidance, he had learned to perceive the subtle energies that flowed through all things, and more importantly, how to manipulate them. "Your progress is remarkable," Zarek observed, his three eyes tracking Kieran's movements with analytical precision. "But you still cling to physical forms when the true dance lies beyond flesh." Kieran paused, his breath steady despite the intense exertion. "I don't understand, Master. How can I move beyond the physical when I am bound by physical form?" A low rumble of amusement echoed through Kieran's mind. "Are you? Look closer, young one. What do you really see when you look at your hands?" Following his master's instruction, Kieran raised his hands before his eyes, focusing not on the flesh and bone, but on the energies that flowed through them. Gradually, his perception shifted. His physical hands seemed to fade, revealing complex patterns of light and energy that extended far beyond his skin. "The body is a vessel," Zarek continued, "but it is not a prison. The ancients of my world understood this. They learned to exist simultaneously in multiple states of being. It was this knowledge that ultimately led to their downfall, and to mine." This was the first time Zarek had spoken directly of his past, and Kieran felt a surge of anticipation. The alien being must have sensed his curiosity, for the chains of starlight clinked softly as he shifted position. "Perhaps it is time you understood more of why I am here," Zarek said, his mental voice heavy with ancient memories. "Approach, young one, and I will show you." Kieran stepped forward, and Zarek extended one of his four-fingered hands. The moment their energies connected, the chamber around them dissolved into a cascade of images and sensations. He found himself standing on a world with purple skies and 3 moons, watching as beings of pure energy danced between crystal spires that stretched into the clouds. This was Zarek's homeworld, Kieran realized, in an age-long past. He saw how Zarek's people had evolved beyond mere physical form, learning to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But with this evolution came hubris. The images shifted, showing how they had begun to manipulate the very fabric of reality, creating and destroying at will. They saw themselves as gods, reshaping worlds according to their whims. Until they encountered something ancient and vast, something that had been watching from between the stars. "The Guardians," Zarek's voice echoed through the vision. They had been maintaining the balance of reality since the first stars ignited. They saw our actions as a threat to the cosmic order. The vision changed again, showing a war that spanned galaxies. Zarek's people, for all their power, found themselves facing beings of such incomprehensible might that reality itself buckled where they fought. Worlds were unmade, stars extinguished, and the very laws of physics were weaponized against both sides. "I was a leader among my people," Zarek continued, the images showing him commanding vast forces of energy beings. "I believed we could negotiate with the Guardians, find a way to coexist. I was wrong." The final battle played out before Kieran's eyes. He watched as Zarek attempted to broker peace, only to be betrayed by extremists among his own people who saw any compromise as weakness. The resulting conflict tears a hole in the fabric of reality itself, threatening to unravel entire dimensions. The Guardians had no choice but to act. Zarek's voice was filled with ancient sorrow. They bound those of us who survived in chains forged from the fundamental forces of the universe itself. We were scattered across reality, imprisoned in places where we could do no further harm. The vision faded, and Kieran found himself back in the underground chamber, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. The implications were staggering. The being before him had once wielded power capable of reshaping reality itself, had fought in wars that made human conflicts seem like children's squabbles. But why here? Kieran asked, finding his voice. Why this planet? Zarek's eyes dimmed slightly. This world holds secrets of its own, young one. The patterns you see on these walls. They are not mere decorations. They are part of a vast network of similar chambers across this galaxy, each housing one of my kind. Together, they form a lock of sorts, keeping something far more dangerous contained. Kieran's mind raced with this new information. The old ones who built this chamber were servants of the Guardians, Zarek finished. They constructed these prisons according to specifications that even I do not fully understand. But they are failing, Kieran. The power that holds us weakens with each passing cycle of your suns. Is that why you're teaching me? Kieran asked, sudden understanding dawning. You need someone to help maintain the prison? A sound like crystalline wind chimes filled the chamber, Zarek's laughter. No, young one. I teach you because I see in you something I once saw in myself, a desire to understand, to transcend limitations, but tempered with wisdom I never possessed. The prison's failing is inevitable, but what comes after, that is something that can still be shaped. For the next several hours, Zarek taught Kieran new techniques, showing him how to perceive the complex energy patterns that made up the chamber's walls. The young warrior learned to read them like a vast mathematical equation, understanding how each symbol contributed to the whole. But as his knowledge grew, so did his concerns. If what Zarek said was true, then the weakening of these prisons could have catastrophic consequences. Yet the alien being seemed surprisingly unconcerned about his impending freedom. Master, Kieran said finally, during a pause in their training, what will happen when the barriers fail completely? Zarek's three eyes focused on him with surprising intensity. That, my student, depends largely on you. The knowledge I share is not just about power or control. It is about understanding the price of ambition, the responsibility that comes with ability. When the time comes, you will have to make choices that will affect not just this world, but many others. But how will I know what to choose? The same way anyone does, by understanding as much as you can, then acting according to your deepest principles. But remember this, the greatest disasters in history were often caused not by those who sought to do evil, but by those who were absolutely certain they were right. As if to emphasize this point, the chamber trembled slightly, dust falling from the distant ceiling. The chains of starlight binding Zarek flickered momentarily, and Kieran felt a surge of power that made his newly awakened senses reel. The process accelerates, Zarek observed calmly. We must make the most of the time that remains. Are you prepared to continue? Kieran straightened his spine, squaring his shoulders. Yes, Master. Good. Then let us begin the true lessons. What I have shown you so far has merely been preparation. Now, you will learn what it means to dance between dimensions, to see the strings that bind reality together, and most importantly, to understand why such knowledge must be wielded with the utmost care. As Kieran settled into his stance, ready to absorb whatever knowledge his alien master would share, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. The future stretched before him like an unopened book, its pages filled with possibilities both wondrous and catastrophic. The chamber's patterns pulsed with increasing frequency, counting down to a moment of transformation that would change not just his life, but potentially the fate of countless worlds. All he could do was prepare, learn, and hope that when the crucial moment came, he would have the wisdom to make the right choice. Echoes of warning. The first sign that something had changed came not from within the chamber, but from above. Kieran was in the middle of a particularly complex energy manipulation exercise when he felt it, a disturbance in the subtle fields of force that permeated the well. Someone was descending. "We have company," Zarek observed, his mental voice carrying a note of curiosity. "Your old master approaches." Kieran's concentration shattered. "Master Su? But how? Did you think your disappearance would go unnoticed?" Zarek's 3 eyes pulsed with amber light. "He has been searching for you. The knowledge you've gained has changed you in ways visible to those who know how to look." Before Kieran could respond, a figure emerged from the well's opening. Master Su, his weathered face illuminated by the chamber's phosphorescent patterns, took in the scene before him with eyes that showed no surprise, only deep concern. "So," the old master said softly, "the rumors were true." He walked forward with the measured grace that Kieran remembered so well from his years of training. "An imprisoned star being, teaching forbidden knowledge to my most promising student." "Master Su," Kieran began, but the old man raised a hand for silence. "I have known of this place since before you were born, Kieran. I have watched generations of seekers descend into this well. None returned unchanged. Most did not return at all." Master Su's gaze shifted to Zarek. "You break our agreement, Ancient One." Zarek's mental voice resonated through the chamber. "Circumstances change, Guardian Servant. The barriers weaken. You feel it as well as I do." Kieran looked between his 2 masters, realization dawning. You knew each other." "The order I serve," Master Su explained, his eyes never leaving Zarek, "has watched over this prison for millennia. We are the descendants of those you call the Old Ones, charged with ensuring that what is bound remains bound." The chamber trembled slightly, and the patterns on the walls flickered. Master Su's expression grew grave. "The disturbances grow stronger. The other sites report similar weakening. Whatever you plan, Ancient One, it will not succeed." "Plan?" Zarek's mental laughter filled their minds. "I plan nothing. I merely prepare. Your order has grown weak, Guardian Servant. You forget why these prisons were built in the first place. The threat they were meant to contain." "We forget nothing," Master Su's voice carried an edge Kieran had never heard before. "We remember the wars that nearly tore reality apart. We remember the pride and ambition that led to such devastation. And we remember the price paid to restore balance." Kieran stepped forward. "Masters, please. There's more happening here than ancient conflicts. The prison weakens not because of any action, but because reality itself changes. I've seen it in the patterns, felt it in the energies we manipulate." Both masters turned to look at him, and Kieran felt the weight of ages in their combined gaze. He continued, drawing upon everything he had learned. "The universe is not static. It evolves, adapts. The barriers were designed for a reality that no longer exists. They're failing because they must fail, because holding on to the old patterns threatens greater damage than letting them go." Master Su's eyes widened slightly. "You teach him more than forms and energy manipulation," he said to Zarek. "You teach him the deep knowledge." "He was ready," Zarek replied simply. "And more importantly, he was necessary. The change comes, whether we will it or not. The question is not if, but how, and who will guide what follows." The chamber shuddered again, more violently this time. The patterns on the walls began to shift and flow like liquid light. Master Su moved with incredible speed, his hands weaving complex patterns in the air. Energy crackled around him as he attempted to stabilize the failing barriers. "It's too late," Zarek said calmly. "The resonance cascade has begun. The other prisons fail, one by one. Soon, all that was bound will be loose upon reality once more. Then we have failed." Master Su's voice was heavy with defeat. The Guardian's trust was misplaced. "No," Kieran interjected, moving to stand between his masters. "Nothing has failed. Everything changes. Everything evolves. Even prison bars must eventually rust away. The question is, what comes after? Do we cling to old conflicts, old fears? Or do we find a new way forward? As if in response to his words, the chamber's trembling intensified. The chains of starlight binding Zarek began to flicker and fade. Master Su raised his hands, prepared to fight to the last, but Kieran caught his arm. "Wait," he said. "Watch." The chains were dissolving, their light dispersing like stardust in a solar wind. But Zarek made no move to rise from his throne. Instead, the ancient being's form began to shift and change, becoming something that Kieran's eyes could barely comprehend. "You see." Zarek's mental voice was gentle. "I could have broken these bonds long ago, once they began to weaken. But that would have served no purpose. The old conflicts are just that, old. The universe has moved on. We must move with it." Master Su lowered his hands slowly, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. "You needed witnesses," he said. "Not just any witnesses, but those who could understand and testify to your transformation." "The Guardians bound us because we were dangerous," Zarek confirmed. "And they were right to do so. We were like children playing with forces we barely understood, convinced of our own righteousness. The imprisonment was not just punishment, it was an opportunity for reflection, for growth." The chamber's walls were now alive with flowing patterns, the ancient symbols rearranging themselves into new configurations. Kieran could read them now, understanding the story they told, not just of imprisonment and guardianship, but of evolution and transformation. "That's why you taught me," he said to Zarek. "Not just the techniques and knowledge, but the wisdom to use them properly. You needed someone who could understand both the old ways and the necessity of change." "More than that," Zarek replied. "I needed someone who could help guide what comes next. The old barriers fall, yes, but new ones must be created, not to imprison, but to channel and direct. The power that was bound will be loose in the universe once more, but this time, there must be those who understand how to work with it rather than trying to control it." Master Su nodded slowly. "And so the student becomes the bridge between worlds." He turned to Kieran. "You understand what this means? The responsibility it places upon you?" Kieran straightened his spine, feeling the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders. "I do, Master. The old conflicts must end, but their lessons must not be forgotten. As the barriers fall, as power returns to the universe, there must be those who remember both the dangers of hubris and the necessity of change." The chamber's trembling had reached a fever pitch. The walls themselves seemed to be dissolving, revealing glimpses of other realities beyond. Zarek rose from his throne at last, his form shifting between states of being that Kieran's human mind struggled to comprehend. "And so we come to the moment of choice," the ancient being said. "The other prisons fail. My kindred awaken. Some will remember the lessons of our imprisonment. Others will not. The universe stands on the brink of transformation, and what comes next depends on those who understand both the old ways and the new." Master Su moved to stand beside Kieran. "You are no longer my student," he said quietly. "Nor are you simply Zarek's. You have become something new, a bridge between worlds, between ways of thinking. The path ahead will not be easy." "When is it ever?" Kieran replied with a slight smile. "But I'm ready. The universe changes. We must change with it, or be left behind." The chamber's walls finally dissolved completely, revealing a vast network of energy patterns connecting all of reality. The time of imprisonment was ending. The time of transformation had begun. And in the heart of that transformation stood a human warrior, trained in ancient arts both terrestrial and cosmic, ready to help guide the universe through its next great evolution. The real question was, would the universe be ready for what came next? Ripples of change. The desert above the well had transformed. Where once there was only endless sand and ancient ruins, now great spirals of energy twisted into the purple-tinged sky. The twin suns of Tellin seemed dim in comparison to the cosmic display unfolding across the horizon. Kieran stood at the well's edge, his perceptions expanded far beyond normal human limits. He could see the cascading effects of the prison's dissolution rippling across reality, a great wave of change spreading outward through dimensions he hadn't even known existed weeks ago. "They're coming," he said quietly. Master Su and Zarek stood on either side of him, the old kung fu master solid and grounded, the alien being shifting through forms like a living kaleidoscope. "Yes," Zarek confirmed. "My kindred awaken. Some seek revenge, others transcendence. All bring change." Already, Kieran could feel them, vast intelligences stirring across the galaxy, ancient beings of pure energy emerging from their prisons. Some radiated anger, others confusion, and a few seemed to have undergone transformations similar to Zarek's. The ground trembled, and in the distance, a pillar of light erupted from beneath the desert sand. Another prison breaking open, another ancient being emerging. This one's thoughts hit Kieran like a physical blow, rage and hatred and an infinite hunger for vengeance. Enexthalith awakens, Zarek's mental voice carried a note of concern. He has learned nothing from his imprisonment. He seeks only to destroy. Master Su's hands moved through a complex series of gestures, reading the energies. He targets the nearest settlement. 10,000 souls, all innocent of ancient crimes. Kieran felt the weight of his new role settling onto his shoulders. This was why he had been trained, why he had been taught to understand both human and cosmic perspectives. He had to act, had to find a way to prevent history from repeating itself. "Show me how to stop him," he said to Zarek. The alien being's form solidified slightly. "I cannot. Any action I take would be seen as aggression by my kind, potentially triggering the very conflict we seek to prevent. This task falls to you, Bridgewalker." Kieran nodded, understanding. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his expanded senses, feeling the approaches Enexthalith took through higher dimensions. The ancient being was like a storm of pure hatred, twisting reality around itself as it moved. Drawing upon his kung fu training, Kieran centered himself, finding balance between the physical and energy realms. Then, incorporating Zarek's teachings, he began to weave a pattern in the fabric of local spacetime. "Clever," Master Su observed. "You're not trying to contain or destroy, you're creating a resonance maze." The oldest teachings of Kung Fu speak of redirecting force, Kieran explained, his consciousness split between multiple levels of reality. The same principle applies here. Enexthalith moves through dimensions like water flowing downhill. I'm simply adjusting the landscape. The pattern he wove was complex, drawing upon both his martial arts training and his newfound understanding of cosmic forces. It was like a kata performed with the substance of reality itself, each movement creating new paths and possibilities. Enexthalith's consciousness brushed against the edge of Kieran's working, and for a moment, the young warrior felt the full weight of the ancient being's attention. It was like standing before an avalanche of hatred and pain, accumulated over millennia of imprisonment. What is this? The thought boomed through multiple dimensions. Who dares to interfere? Kieran stood his ground, maintaining his focus on the pattern he was creating. One who understands, he projected back. One who sees both the pain of imprisonment and the necessity of growth. Human, Enexthalith's mental voice dripped with contempt. Your kind are nothing but dust. You understand nothing of cosmic forces. Perhaps, Kieran agreed, continuing to weave his pattern. But I understand this, revenge against the innocent serves no purpose. The guardians who imprisoned you are long gone. The beings you would destroy had no part in your punishment. The ancient being's fury intensified, and reality itself seemed to buckle under the pressure. But Kieran's pattern held, redirecting the force of Enexthalith's anger back upon itself, creating a loop that the cosmic entity would have to understand to break free from. You dare to trap me again? Enexthalith raged. No trap, Kirin replied calmly. A mirror. A chance to see yourself and your actions clearly. You can break free at any time, but only by understanding the pattern, and in understanding it, you must confront the truth of what you've become. The energies swirled and crashed like ocean waves against rocks, but Kirin maintained his stance, both physical and metaphysical. He could feel Enexthalith testing the pattern, probing for weaknesses, and in doing so, being forced to examine the shape of his own hatred. Hours passed. The twin suns crossed the sky. More pillars of light appeared on the horizon as other prisons dissolved, but Kirin kept his focus on the immediate challenge. He had made his pattern well, Enexthalith could break it easily, but only by achieving the kind of calm, centered awareness that Kirin had learned through his martial arts training. Finally, the storm of rage began to subside. Enexthalith's consciousness shifted, not losing its power but finding a different configuration. You are not what you seem, human, the ancient being observed. You have learned from the star dancer Zarek. I have learned from many teachers, Kirin replied. Each offering a different perspective, a different way of understanding reality. There is no single truth, no absolute right or wrong, only the endless dance of change and growth. The pattern began to dissolve, not because it was broken but because it was no longer needed. Enexthalith emerged transformed, not as drastically as Zarek but changed nonetheless. Perhaps, the cosmic being conceded, perhaps there is wisdom in seeing with new eyes. Kirin felt other consciousnesses watching, the awakened ancients observing how this human had handled one of their most violent kindred. He had passed his first test, not through force or dominance, but through understanding and transformation. Well done, Zarek's mental voice carried approval. You begin to understand your role. Not to police or control, but to offer new perspectives, new ways of approaching old conflicts. Master Su nodded in agreement. The ancient ways and the new, working in harmony. But this is only the beginning. More will come, and not all challenges can be met with the same approach. Kirin watched as Enexthalith's consciousness merged with the desert wind, spreading out to explore this changed universe with newfound awareness. Already he could feel more disturbances, more awakenings approaching. Each would present its own unique challenge, its own opportunity for growth and transformation. I'm ready, he said, and he meant it. The path ahead would be difficult, but he had been prepared for this role in ways he was only beginning to understand. The universe was changing, and he would help guide that change, one awakening at a time. The twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the transformed desert. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what new patterns would emerge from this time of awakening and transformation. And at the heart of it all stood Kirin, no longer just a student of Kung Fu, but a bridge between worlds, helping to guide the universe through its next great. The New Dawn. A month had passed since the dissolution of the prisons, and the universe had changed in ways that even Zarek hadn't fully anticipated. Kirin stood atop the highest dune in the Desert of Whispers, watching as ribbons of cosmic energy painted arrays of impossible colors across the sky. The twin suns of Telin were setting, but the light show above made twilight as bright as noon. The convergence approaches, Zarek said, his form shimmering like heat waves rising from the sand. The moment when all awakened ones must choose their path forward. Master Su, who had remained by Kirin's side through the challenges of the past month, nodded gravely. The old order passes away entirely. What comes next will reshape reality itself. Kirin had been busy during this time of transition. After his success with Enexthalith, other awakened ancients had sought him out. Some came in anger, others in curiosity, but each encounter had taught him something new about his role as a bridge between worlds. Their gathering, Kirin said, his expanded senses detecting vast intelligences converging from across the galaxy. All of them, coming here. The desert itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. This was the moment everything had been leading to, not just the past month, but millennia of imprisonment and transformation. The awakened ancients would soon make a choice that would determine the course of cosmic evolution. You understand what must be done? Zarek asked, though it wasn't really a question. Kieran nodded. I have to show them another way. Not just with words or thoughts, but with action. He turned to Master Su. The form you taught me, the one you said I wasn't ready for, I think I understand it now. The old master's eyes widened slightly. The harmony of opposing forces? That technique was only theoretical. None have ever successfully performed it. Because it was missing something, Kieran explained. It needed both, the physical discipline of Kung Fu and the cosmic understanding of the ancients. Neither complete without the other, both transformed by their combination. Above them, the sky began to fill with points of light, not stars, but the gathered consciousness of awakened beings. Some burned with barely contained fury, others pulsed with curiosity or anticipation. All were watching, waiting to see what would happen on this insignificant desert world. Kieran moved to the center of a vast circle that had been naturally formed by wind-carved stones. His physical body settled into the opening stance of the form, while his expanded consciousness reached out to touch the fabric of reality itself. Brothers and sisters of the star winds, Zarek's mental voice rang out to all gathered. Watch now as one born of dust shows us a new way forward. Kieran began to move. The form started simply enough, movements any student of Kung Fu would recognize. But as he progressed, each gesture began to affect multiple levels of reality simultaneously. He was dancing not just with his body, but with the fundamental forces that bound the universe together. What is this display meant to prove? The thought came from one of the more aggressive ancients. That humans can mimic our powers? Watch closer, Kieran projected back, never breaking the flow of his movement. This isn't about power. It's about harmony. As he moved through the form, reality began to reshape itself around him. But unlike the brutal manipulations that had led to the ancients' imprisonment, these changes were subtle, collaborative. He wasn't forcing reality to bend to his will, he was working with it, suggesting rather than demanding. The gathered intelligences watched in growing fascination as Kieran demonstrated what was possible when ancient wisdom and new understanding worked in concert. His movements created patterns that rippled through multiple dimensions, each change building on the last in an ever more complex dance of transformation. He shows us what we forgot, NX Thalatha's consciousness resonated. The art of working with reality rather than against it. Other awakened ones began to understand. They saw in Kieran's demonstration not just technique, but a philosophy, a way of approaching existence that offered something beyond the old cycles of conflict and dominance. As the form reached its apex, Kieran's consciousness expanded to encompass all gathered. For a brief moment, they were one mind experiencing infinite perspectives simultaneously. Each ancient being felt what it was to be human, with all the limitations and possibilities that entailed. And Kieran experienced what it was to be them, vast, powerful, but also capable of growth and change. When the form concluded, there was silence both physical and mental. Then, one by one, the gathered intelligences began to shift, their patterns changing as they absorbed the implications of what they had witnessed. We need not repeat old conflicts, one of them projected. There are new ways to be. The Guardians were right to bind us, another added, but now we have grown beyond those bonds. Zarek's form solidified briefly as he addressed his kindred. The universe evolves. We must evolve with it, finding new ways to exist within the great pattern. The humans have much to teach us about this, just as we have much to teach them. A partnership, Master Su suggested. Each bringing their own wisdom to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The gathered ancients began to pulse with new patterns of energy as they considered these possibilities. The very fabric of reality seemed to hold its breath, waiting for their collective decision. Finally, it came. Not in words or even thoughts, but in a subtle shift of consciousness that rippled through all present. The awakened ones had chosen to embrace change, to explore what was possible when ancient power was tempered by new understanding. "It begins," Kirin said softly, watching as the assembled beings began to disperse, each carrying away a new perspective on existence. "No," Zarek corrected gently. "It continues. The universe never truly begins or ends, it only transforms. And now we shall help guide that transformation, together." Master Su placed a hand on Kirin's shoulder. "Your training is complete," he said, "and yet it has only begun. The path ahead will not be easy." Kirin smiled, watching as the sky above Telin blazed with new possibilities. "The best paths never are. But they're worth walking anyway." The twin suns had set completely now, but the desert glowed with its own light, the combined radiance of ancient power and new wisdom working in harmony. Reality itself was changing, becoming something that had never existed before, neither purely physical nor purely energy, but a harmonious blend of both. And at the heart of this transformation stood Kirin, no longer just a student of Kung Fu, no longer just a bridge between worlds, but something entirely new. He was the first of what would become many, beings who could walk between the old ways and the new, helping to guide the universe through its ongoing evolution. The Desert of Whispers lived up to its name that night, as countless grains of sand caught the light of transformation and seemed to sing with the music of infinite possibility. The story of the imprisoned star beings was ending, but a new story was just beginning, one that would be written across the stars themselves by those who had learned to dance with reality instead of trying to control it. As Kirin stood between his two masters, watching the future unfold in patterns of light and energy, he felt a deep sense of rightness. The universe was changing, but change itself was the greatest constant of all. The true art lay not in resisting it, but in helping to guide it toward harmony rather than chaos. The next great adventure was just beginning,